go. Well, good morning. Good morning to our online class. Thank you for being here. We're slowly assembling here in the worship center for class this morning, and we are going to be observing the Lord's Supper this morning during the morning worship service. So, if you have some elements there at your house that you'd like to use to join with us, you can do that. We would welcome that. Also, if you would be so kind, drop us a note. Let us know where you're joining us from. That's always fun, just to see where ALF is this morning. But it's a windy morning here in the worship center, and it can be quite loud because there's not much between us and the elements. One set of cedar planking, probably decking and shingles. That's about it. So we're as close to the elements as being out in them. So good morning, buddy. It's good to see you. Thanks for being there. And I've sent you your notes for the morning, so buddy gets special delivery. So it is good. It's been a good day, and it's been a great weekend. We had a great time yesterday. A lot of great work was done and good fellowship. And I love those days. I've always loved work days, and I've always loved just seeing the church be about, taking care of the church and those sort of things. So it's been a good day. So let's see. Let's remember when Tuesday night is Ladies Fellowship. Guys, we're welcome, but we're not invited. So we've got that. And then Wednesday night is our egg hunt. And I see that Mother Nature is threatening to not be social. But it's okay. If we have inclement weather, there's always a plan B. So there will be eggs, and there will be hunting. So that'll be good. And so we're going to commit all of Wednesday night to that. And then next Sunday, of course, is Easter. And for our regulars, I want to encourage you to kind of maybe arrive a little bit early. That way, if the weather allows, maybe we can park some down on the grass and leave space for our guests. Also, Lord willing, the seating might be a premium, So, but I hope we'll have a nice large crowd for Easter. I haven't looked at the weather, but it seems like the last few Easters, the weather has been a little this, a little that. So, but it'll be okay. We'll have a great time. And like I said, I'm thinking about a message entitled, "What Do You Want?" I haven't decided if I'm going to go with that yet or not, but anyway, so it should be good. Good morning, Mr. McKinney, Mrs. McKinney. It is, isn't it? Ronnie, it looks like he's sore from the work day yesterday. Hauled off 2 truckloads. Got a question, why are you dumping that in our canister? Did he? Well, hey, he is nothing if not consistent. So we appreciate that. Well, all right. Well, let's go ahead. We're going to continue. Over the last several weeks, we've been looking at a study entitled Onward, and we're talking about the role of the church in society. So, it's interesting is each generation of the church is easily consumed by its generation, its challenges, its motivations. Good morning, Jason. Great to see you from New Mexico. Thank you. Jason, I need to call you. I cannot get my new router and the app to hook up. And I know it's me. It can't be the technology. It must be me. So, Jason, I'm going to be reaching out to you here soon. So, anyway. But the challenge that we face is each generation of the church has to focus, has to fight, and has to find its place and its process. And we live in a very interesting time. What are some distinctives of, let's just say, this time in history? Let's go back 30 years. What are some distinctive challenges that we may have today that we didn't have 30 years ago, or we weren't aware of? How about that? What are some? Yes, PCs, computers, yeah. Like I said, I think it was last week, on my iPad, I've got probably 40 translations of the Bible. And, 30 years ago, you typically had one, whichever one you were carrying in under your arm. And oh, well, no, I never really learned to read King James. I have a King James Bible, and I bought it because the Christian school that Brother Earl was coach at invited me to speak at chapel, and they were KJV only. And I remember speaking to their headmaster. He goes, "Oh yeah, we're KJV only." And I said, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah." I go, "Okay." I didn't have one, so I went and got a KJV, and looked like I was reading at about a second grade level. Now, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying it's different. I never learned the King's English, and so, but yes, personal computers. You have more biblical text in your phone if you have just a singular app than the early church probably owned for the entirety of their lives. They would get a manuscript, a copy of a letter, and that would be, the New Testament to them, right? What are some other differences, challenges, blessings that we have from just 30 years ago? Right. Yeah. Well, 30 years ago, to be together, you had to be together. I mean, I was thinking about that Friday morning, so I had a 4 o'clock wake-up call because I had to be at Big Presby with some folks at 6 a.m., so that meant leaving my house at 5. But Karina was having knee surgery that morning, and so I sent her a text the evening before. I said, "Hey, I really would like to pray over you, if that's okay." It's funny. I haven't had anyone tell me yet they don't want me to pray over them. I'm batting 1,000. And so I called her, sitting in the lobby at Presbyterian, and prayed over her and her husband for the day. And what was wonderful was that was good. There used to be that if the pastor wasn't standing in the room, that, and I still enjoy to do that, but the expectation of that's changed. Yeah, to be together, you had to be together. And 30 years ago, we were together a lot more. Church was a much more of a center pin of life than it is, I think of, three hinge pins on a door. Used to, our lives swung on, kind of 2 hinges. Now it's 3 or more. So any others that you can think of? Differences, challenges, blessings? Yeah. Mm. Right. Yes. Any moment of any day, you can turn on any device and find a news source. And today, not only can you find the 3, you remember you had ABC, CBS, and whatever the third one. And if you weren't there at 10 o'clock, what was it, 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock that the news used to come on? If you weren't there at 6 and 10, you weren't getting it. Well, today it's 24/7 from anywhere in the world. You can go to the BBC. They're not Walter Cronkite. That's true. Thank you, Ronnie. That dates you. That's right. That's right. It's almost impossible to find a source that's just the facts, ma'am. Everybody has an opinion, and it tends to work its way in, right? Back in the day, at least it appeared, their efforts were, I may have an opinion, but I'm just giving you the facts. So yes, that's true. Oh yeah, the rest of the story. I love that one. So we've been talking about the church, and in this present generation, we talked about God's kingdom. There's only two kingdoms in the world. You can subdivide the world 101 ways, but there's only two. You're a child of the king, or you're a child of the world, or the king of this world. One of them you get by birthright. The second one you get by what? Second birthright. And very important. And I'm not going to say you can't be a citizen of one and live like the other, but I really don't want to get into security of the believer this morning. But anyway, we talked about the culture. Our culture is so much different. Just look at the way you heathens are dressed. I mean, 30 years ago, no. Oh, yeah. 30 years ago in this building, you would really not be right, because our Presbyterian brothers are a little, they're a little more high church. The pews were 4 inches each closer together. They built them so when you were in, you were staying in. We knew we had to do something about the pews when one of the smallest framed young ladies in our church felt the need and took the exit of going under the pews to get to the potty. Yeah, I just don't know if our Presbyterian brothers were smaller, which is possible, or if they just didn't want to move it around, which is possible. And you'd have had an organ right there. Now, that organ was beautiful. I mean, every time I came over here to visit, it seemed like the organist was here practicing, and man, she would crank it up and she would play it mad because she knew I was the guy taking her to church. Yeah, she was. I'd walk in and man, she'd give me the side eye and anyway. But we had talked about the culture. The culture is so much different today. The culture is different inside the church, for better and for worse. The challenge that we face in the church is taking things to the extremes and maintaining the unwavering conviction to the unwavering truths of the church. Culture has most assuredly changed outside of the church. We've been talking this entire Lent about mission. What is the mission of the church? What is the mission as individuals? What is our mission? To know him and to make him known. That's the simple statement. But like I teased Sean Wednesday night, he asked me a great question. And I said, well, okay, I understand what you're saying, but what does that look like, right? We can have great answers, and they're true answers, but then we have to figure out what does that look like? How do we express that answer? And so our mission of the church this generation. So we've discussed these things. As we continue to focus on the mission of the kingdom, we are going to encounter specific issues which we can bear witness for the gospel. And one of them today is the issue of human dignity. Human dignity. Now, depending on where you are, you can ask that question and you can go a lot of different ways, can't you? What is the state of human dignity? How do we address human dignity? And those sort of things. What are some of the areas of life in which we can see human dignity and the sanctity of life being challenged today? What are some of the areas that we can see today where the sanctity and the dignity of life is challenged? The abortion issue. Yes. Yes. This class isn't on that, but yeah, there's a fervent battle over protection in the womb. And I think the unfortunate truth is it'll be a battle till Jesus comes. But it's a battle nonetheless. And it's a battle worth fighting. It's interesting to me is I've never met a single individual who would have liked for their mother to choose the pathway of abortion. I've never met one. Now, I've stood alongside a young lady who made that choice, and not only did it change her, but it changed me, and I was just along for moral comfort. And this was before I knew Christ as my Savior. That's true. What else? Are there any other things going on in our world that test and try human dignity or human. How about human smuggling? We hear that a lot, don't we? You know, our border is in crisis. It doesn't matter which side of the political aisle you choose to stand on. The border in our nation is in crisis. And there are people who are profiteering off that crisis. Now listen, many of us have stood alongside people who didn't have enough money to pay attention. And many of us wouldn't blame someone for trying to get to something better. Okay? However, a society that has no law will not have a society long. But what is even worse than the tension there is this, is when people will turn human beings into commodities by which they can broker finances. That's the worst. And you hear stories every day. If you turn on if you go to the news, you can hear. I have seen documentation stories about these coyotes. They get close enough to security. One guy actually tossed a baby into the river, knowing that the security officers would save the baby more so than capturing him. That's terrible. It's unthinkable to me. But how about human trafficking? When you'll take a child or a man or a woman, a young man, a young woman, and you'll use them as a commodity. And we see that even going on even with the issues in Ukraine. They're over there battling people who would traffic these individuals who are fleeing from the war zone. They have to give them some way of knowing who you can trust and whose car you can get into. What a terrible thing. You're running away from a war, and now you have to worry about some wolf that's willing to take you and rob you of your human dignity. We must place value on people. Now the question is what is that value? We've been talking about that from Sermon 1 this Lent. What is the profit of one, or what is the value of one? Everybody thinks one's important, but the question is through whose lens do we look? The world says it's based on what you can provide. That's the reason we get trafficking. That's the reason abortion is, the struggle is the values based on who's inconvenienced and these sort of things. Lord, how many of us had kids and you thought, how will we ever afford them? You don't afford them. You don't. I have young people all the time. We're going to wait till we can afford them. I said, well, then you'll never have children. Because the truth, I don't know about you. I don't know how I paid for mine.
What is the number that you say, oh, now we can afford it?
Right.
You see the bank account,
Yeah. It really is miraculous, because kids are expensive. They just are. But we find ourselves in convenience. So the world bases it on a different economy. The church and God bases it on the fact that every born individual carries the image of God in them. And that is where we come in. Does the church bat 1,000 in seeing people the way that God sees them? No, we can strive to it. We really can. But we don't bat 1,000. Why? Because the church is made up of sinners. And we wrestle with sin and we wrestle with, these sort of things. I love, in the Bible where it talks about not treating the influential people differently. Let's just think, Elon Musk is now a citizen of Texas. Now, I don't know, but he's got a little extra money. Now, what if, no, he is not a Texan. Did you see him wearing the cowboy hat the other day when he was doing the thing? He looked very, very funny. But anyway, but imagine if Elon Musk decided that ALF was going to be his church. Would he be welcomed? He absolutely would. That's right. Okay, Mr. Mudd, let us begin the new members class with giving. But if we, including myself, were not careful, because, Jeff, we'd like a new parking lot, wouldn't we? The fire department was by on Thursday.
Right. Cause another hole.
Well, let's just say the one's no longer alone.
Oh,
And listen, Mr. Musk, he could handle that. He just bought 15% of Twitter. He's now the majority stockholder in Twitter. And everybody's up in arms, right? He's going to give us an edit button, which is awesome. That'll save some people. But we have to be so careful, because our human nature can step forward sometimes. And if Mr. Musk decided that ALF was going to be his church, we all would have to be very intentional to not allow what we know of him to interfere with or to guide our love of him, our friendship to him, our expectations. Can you imagine walking in here and your car, hits that hole out in the parking lot, and you think, well, he could pay for it? That's not what God says. But if we're not careful, right? So why does God identify so closely with the groups of people that our culture at times can ignore in the world? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. That's right. The commodity is time. Because if you talk about money, well, the exchange is time for money. That's the exchange in life, right? Time and effort for money. And so everything does boil back to time. And time is a fleeting thing. I remember when I was younger, and the really old people would say, time flies, and the older you get, the worse it becomes. And I thought, old people. Well, now I'm in the neighborhood of them, and it couldn't be more true. No, hey, it couldn't be more true. I've mentioned before, it astonishes me how quickly Fridays get here. It really does. It scares me a little, because it seems like the day after tomorrow will be Friday. And the reason I mark that is that's the day Gigi comes to care for the campus, and it's just, oh man, because it's
what you do? You tell her you just left.
yeah. Did you stay overnight? And because life is a certain uncertainty. You like that one? Copyright T-shirt worthy. A certain uncertainty. That's right. We can even proof text it. The 25-year-old heir apparent quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers was in Florida practicing and these things. I don't know all the ins and outs, but he was struck by a car and killed. 25 years old. I didn't know very much at 25. Now, I was happily married, and I think we had our first kiddo, but I wasn't the warehouse of learnedness that sits before you today at 25. But here's a young man who had given a lot of his precious time to hone a skill that had earned him the opportunity to perform on the highest level. He had, well, more money than we'll have. He now had the unabated opportunity. Why? Because Ben Roethlisberger retired. The man he was in the shadow of has stepped away. Now, guess what? It's all his. But he'll never get a chance to do that. Why? Because life is a certain uncertainty. And we wrestle with that. We wrestle with the fact that time is precious. Oh, man. And how we invest it, how much we give, and those sort of things. I was telling you, that's all right, because I'm planning on using this for a couple weeks anyway. So yesterday, I love work days. I just love them. I love being here. If you don't know that yet, I love being at this place, and I love being at this place with you people, and I love being at this place when we're doing things as unto the Lord. And I'm reminded of a time years ago when I was at Dixon as a young minister. I can remember many a time saying, hey, I think we really do need to do X. Should we hire someone to do it? Oh, my, what I would get. What do you mean, hire someone to do it? Well, we could do it. I remember one of our older deacons with a rope around his waist, lashed to the bottom of the steeple, painting it. Because, dadgum, we're not paying someone. I sat there and let me just say, a fall would have been the end of it all. So, good morning, come in. And so he was there, and he was committed. And, all right, we'll take a pause. Yeah, there was more than one pickle in the barrel. And Bobby, I just want you to know you are always welcome to do a grand entrance. Oh, it's all good, brother. It's all good. And then I can remember over a period of time, the number of people grew, the number of resources grew, the number of needs grew, and there was a transition to where the question was, well, hey, I think we really need to do this. And on more than one occasion, I received this. Hey, if I just write you a check, can you get someone? Now, I'm not saying that's wrong, but you can see a transition in mentality. There are certain things you need to hire out. We needed to get professionals to fix that roof. We could have given it the college try, but there's a time and a place, right? But there was this transformation of mentality, right? And we have to be very careful of that, because part of what keeps this place near to our hearts is the sweat equity we put into it. Think about it. The places that we go to, I went to hockey Friday night. Let me just say this. It was Mormon night at the hockey game. There was a lot of them. And anyway, it's funny. There were a lot of people, a lot of kids. Anyway, but I can go to the hockey game and I can enjoy being there and I can enjoy who I'm there with. But you know what? That building doesn't mean anywhere close to what this building needs to be. Why? Because all I've done is gone there and been entertained. Have I contributed money in that building? I have. Trust me. Have I spent time in that building? I have. Have I worn the appropriate garb in that building? I have. Do I look forward to going to that building? I do. Do I enjoy who I'm in the building with? I do. But what's the difference between that building and this building? Well, the purpose, the ownership. God moved in a mighty way to make this our home. I just have to pay the appropriate amount of cash to get into that building. And so we have to be very careful about when we no longer have that special value. And so we see people, and the question on the table was, why does God identify so closely with the groups of people who are ignored and mistreated in our world? I think, part of it is Jesus came to save that which is lost. I think it's a spiritual statement, but I think it's also a humanitarian statement. What are some other reasons that the marginalized find Christianity appealing? That's such a strange statement, but we'll go with it. Why do you think people who are marginalized might see Christianity appealing? Their structure, right? In a world that seems out of control, the church can seem structured, and that's why some people gravitate towards the more high church. It's very structured, it's very regimented, and you can find comfort in that. I enjoy some high church. Now I don't think I would enjoy it every Sunday, but I do. There's a comfort in that. Yeah. What else? Very good. Right. That's a great point there, Dad. And it is very prevalent today. Either you're like me or I'm against you. That's the way it goes. And yes, the church is supposed to be arms open and welcoming, right? Is that always the case? Does the phrase "come as you are" mean that? Really? Far too often, I'm afraid, "come as you are" means get here and then become just like us as quick as you can. I think that's what "come as you are" oftentimes means, right? Because if we're not careful, we put high priority on some things that aren't biblically priority. One is the attire. Now, again, I'm not saying that there's a right and a wrong. But I'm saying is this, is if a person walks into this place today for the first time, unless they're wearing a tuxedo, they're not going to feel out of place. Now, if you want to wear a tux to church, awesome. You do that. You are welcome here. You know, just please don't make it too startling because you'll distract me, But those that find themselves on the outside looking in, when they look at the church, we need to do the best that we can to not foster that feeling. Now, let me ask you this question. Does that mean the church must be willing to change everything for the sake of comfort? No. There are unshakable, unnegotiable truths of the Scripture that simply cannot and will not be changed. And that sometimes is an offense, isn't it? Have you ever had someone, I'm not trying to pick a fight here right now, but who would have ever thought we would have a Supreme Court judge who didn't want to give her answer or willing to give her answer on what is a female? And like I said, I'm not trying to pick a fight or anything, but I mean, 30 years ago, you say, what's a female? Well, I mean, who's not going to answer that? It's a different world. And there are certain things. Yeah. And, anyway. But in India, Jeff and I have had the opportunity to go to India. India is a Hindu nation. And they have, it seems like the last time I read, 1,300 gods, give or take. Now, first of all, I can't remember them all. 1,300. One of the challenges in India about ministering the gospel is an Indian goes, oh, one more God? All right. Well, no, that's not what God says. God says, what? I'm the, not a. And so getting them to the exclusivity of God in light of all these others, that's a challenge. But in India also, they have a caste system. Where you're born is where you stay. And where you are has a direct correlation to how you're treated, what you're thought about, how you're thought about, opportunities that are afforded to you. And so in India, when you start talking about a faith that makes every person standing on level ground, now they start listening. Why? Because their culture and their religion might tell them, this is going to sound terrible, but they might look at them and go, you're not worth the resources that it takes. You're not worth the space. You're not worth, how terrible is that? But I can promise you, somewhere in India, there's someone that thinks that way about the lowest class. But when we talk about Jesus and we talk about the foot of the cross, where every man and every woman must pass, it's level. Irregardless of nationality, irregardless of gender, irregardless of financial status, the foot of the cross is level. And when you start talking about a person's value is based on what God did for them instead of all these other things, people begin to see things different. It's a liberating thing, isn't it? Isn't it a wonderful thing to know that God loves you? He does. He just loves you. You say, well, but, I can do... No. It's funny. If we're not careful, we immediately want to start adding on. God loves you. And he loves you 100%. Since when? Since I got saved? No. Since I surrendered to ministry? No. God loved me 100% since the foundation of the world, before the foundation of the world. Jesus loved me 100% when he hung on that cross. Me. Now, he loved you too, because he's just that good, but he loved me. And then he gives me the opportunity to choose. He loves me enough to display his love for me, to invite me to be a benefactor of that love, and I won't force you to take it. Would the world be easier if you could force people to do some stuff? You ever watch the news and you go, man, I tell you what, if I were president, yeah. Listen, if I were king, if I were God, have you ever played that game with yourself? Well, if I were God. Think about it. You have omniscience. That means you know everything now. So you know. And our human hearts go, you know what? I would just nip that in the bud. That little baby named Adolf, I'll take care of that. And we would feel self-justified in doing it. History wouldn't applaud us for doing it because they wouldn't know. But yes. Yes.
They were sick.
Yes.
They thought we needed a certain way.
Yes. Mhm.
When I read out the world different types of theology
Right.
and find social,
Right.
find Hebrew, all these different versions that we sometimes
Right.
it's written by someone else completely.
Right.
Because this is
I think that the greatest challenge in the poor theology that exists is this. Is, we've mentioned before, is that when we think of God and his son Jesus and the theology that's taught to us in the scripture, we wrestle with an understanding and we start to try to put handles on it. And it's understandable, but there's a danger in that. Because if we put handles on them, then the next logical step, if we're not careful, is we want to start controlling it. Right? And so I believe a lot of the poor theology and processes that are out there is human weakness, human pride, or human process of trying to understand. Because when we glimpse God for who he is, even the disciples of this age can become offended. Mm-hmm. Right. Still is. Yes. That's right. That's right. That's the greatest challenge is we should strive to see individuals as people who can do nothing for us. We should love and serve and respect and value irregardless of the return on investment. And that is hard. But it can be done. And yes, those that we minister to, those that visit our blessings box and that, who have nothing, literally nothing. When we can minister to them in the same heart and compassion that we could minister to Elon Musk, then we're acting like Jesus. And that's a challenge. But it can be done. And I'll say this as my closing statement. I've been in the presence of people who didn't, by this world standard, have one thing. Didn't have one thing. And they walked a long way to be in my presence with their nothing. But the joy that person has, where does that come from? Well, it must come from the Lord. Because there's not anything in this world that they have. When you get to see that in an individual, whether it's in a third world country or Greenville, Texas, that begins to change things. So, yes. All right. Well, we're gonna drop off there. It's 1:45. For those at home, get up, potty up, get you a cup, and come back and join us in 15. And we're going to take 15 here. I love you guys. Thank you for being with us.